Dear friends, hello, and fans and loyal supporters and everybody else from the Twilight who supports the Twilight Zone. So, maybe a few of you out there will watch this video, hopefully more than a few, but maybe a few more of you will remember what this week is. But by the time I post this, probably it will be after the fact. In fact, the date has already passed. The dates have already passed. August 24th and 25th, 2002 were monumental days in Twilight Zone history. And why were they? Because that weekend marked the very first, to our knowledge, world's first ever Twilight Zone convention, an event solely dedicated to Twilight Zone in the convention format. There were other things over the years. The MTR Museum of Television and Radio had some things prior to that, but never a convention. And we did it, and we, being myself and my conventioneering partner, Bill DeVoe, did that show, and also a sequel show 2 years later in August of 2004, both at Beverly Garland's Holiday Inn in North Hollywood, California, which is about a half an hour from where I'm sitting right now. And it was really that convention and the process of doing it that changed my entire life, because that was really what got me to California. I didn't move here until 2004, shortly before our second convention, but that was really what got me from my old state to my new one. I used to live in Oregon. So anyway, and then the rest is just kind of history. But anyhow, this convention that we did, the very first one, we had roughly 60 actors and others who were involved with the series, including directors and writers, all in one place that weekend. And we started planning it not long after, like a month or so after 9/11. We never expected, one, that this thing was actually going to go. But it did, and we found an organization to work with us, and they, of course, helped make it happen. And then the next time when we did it, we spun off on our own and did it ourselves. And to this day, I will be forever grateful to Beverly and her staff for really giving us the hotel, to use. And I think that was maybe in small part due to the fact that Beverly was a part of that show, and as everybody knows about her, she was just a tremendously good actress. Not maybe a household name, but plenty of people, anybody who knows film and TV, especially old B films, knows the name Beverly Garland, who later she continued acting all throughout, for the rest of her life. But she kind of took a detour in the early 1970s, and with her husband, started a hotel, which is still very much alive and well, and still in the same location in North Hollywood. Although it's not a Holiday Inn anymore, it is just called the Garland, and to my knowledge still operated by her family. So anyhow, how did we do this and why? Well, there had been talk for many, many, many years. I'm talking not just, a few years or some years before we did it. I mean, back probably into the 1970s, as far back as that, when Star Trek conventions started being done. Well, as the years went on, a lot of people waited and kind of wondered just to see if there would ever be anything Twilight Zone related, as far as a convention that came along. And I remember an interview done with Jean Carson, who everybody remembers from A Most Unusual Camera, which was in about 1996, 7, 8, something like that. And she mentioned in that, she said, I don't think I remember ever being a part of any convention that was exclusively Twilight Zone. So, which was interesting. So what happened was, eventually, Bill DeVoe of Texas got into the works a possible Twilight Zone themed cruise. Well, it sounded like a good idea, and it was a good idea, but ultimately it never quite happened. I think it was kind of cost prohibitive, especially for those who would have to fly in from out of state, and to leave from wherever the boat was leaving from. And it just kind of, for one reason or another, just kind of did not happen. But at the same time, it paved the way for everything that we ended up doing with the conventions. And we found kind of initially that it was kind of a little bit of an uphill battle. We certainly had, the whole process was not without its challenges. But eventually we were able to start getting a lot of people because word got around about it. And so before we know it, suddenly we had not just 5 or 6 who said yes, we had 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, and some of them were real milestones, and that it was like we really started to get pumped once we got certain people. Anne Francis and James Best and Earl Hamner said they would all be there, and they were there. And Cliff Robertson, of course, Mickey Rooney and Julie Newmar. And it was just, amazing to us that we were able to get all these people. And then in 2004, we got even more who we hadn't found in 2002. But I must say, the morning of August 24th, Saturday, August 24th of 2002, was quite memorable. As the doors opened, there was a long line of people stretching through the parking lot, and finally the fabled Twilight Zone convention was happening. And then we had 3 panel discussions that happened in the afternoon after lunch, and there was the hotel was just absolutely alive with Twilight Zone spirit, if you will. And even Earl Hamner said on the writer panel, he said, I really feel that Rod Serling and Buck Houghton are really here with us right now. I kind of feel that they're here. And he was absolutely right. They were definitely there in spirit. And Buck Houghton's wife, Wanda, even stopped by for a while to say hi to Suzanne Lloyd, who she hadn't seen in a long time. They were old friends. And so anyway, going back a little bit, how did this thing actually get to happen? Well, it was not exactly easy, and for many years, I think there was a lot of murmuring and discussion, but I remember talking with a certain agent who did not work in Hollywood. He made his home in the Midwest someplace, and he represented like 4 or 5 actors who who'd appeared on Twilight Zone, and William Wyndham was one of them. And when I emailed him through his website, I said, we're doing this event, we'd love to have all of them there. Him, William Wyndham, and whoever else, Antoinette Bauer, I think, and a few others. And he said, Andrew, here's my number. Please call me. I want to talk with you about this. And he said, you're doing something that, I really think is fantastic. He said, I and others have been, wondering if there was ever going to be a Twilight Zone convention. And it's like, yeah. So needless to say, I talked to him a fair amount, over the next few months, and then they were all there, Mr. Wyndham and Antoinette Bauer and whoever else. But even before that, these murmurings that I'm speaking of really went back a long ways. Now, I remember in about 1998, I joined or got onto this website, this wonderful old website called The Fifth Dimension, thefifthdimension.com, that had a message board, a wonderful message board that was good for a while, and before it kind of started getting overrun with kind of like what you see now on Facebook on some of these, fan-obsessed Facebook pages for certain TV shows or whatever. But anyway, there was a lot of talk like convention. Somebody would write it. This is an old-style message board. It's an old CGI script type message board, and you could post something. Said convention ? Question mark, and somebody would start a discussion about that and how it could be done or where it could be done or what might be done there. Would we have trivia games, trivia contests, dress-up contests, to see who could come up with the cleverest Twilight Zone costume, and all this garbage. And I was reading it thinking, no way in heck would anybody want to come to something like that. Least of all the actors who appeared on Twilight Zone. They're not going to come to some terrible thing like that. But anyway, I started kind of toying it around in my brain. It's like, where could we do it? Well, at the time I was a college student, and I was thinking, we could do it on my, this university campus where I was going to school. Maybe if we could get them to give it to us for a reasonable price. But what were we going to do? And at that time, I was only vaguely familiar with Star Trek conventions or autograph type conventions. And ultimately, it was the autograph type convention thing that got it started. Because we found out that there was one that was held at Beverly Garland's Holiday Inn 4 times a year. So it's like if we could hook on with them, somebody who suggested it, Anne Francis. It was Anne Francis who said, call these people who do this autograph show. She said, I've been to it a couple times as a celebrity guest. Call them and do it at the Beverly Garland. See, it's all coming back to me. I could talk for hours about this stuff, guys. I could go on and on and on and on. I can't, though. I'm going to wrap this up here momentarily. But that was really, the spark that lit the whole thing. And these people agreed to work with us. So, needless to say, it happened and it was just fantastic. But on this Fifth Dimension website, I remember one person said, amongst, there were any number of naysayers who really never thought it could happen. One person said, if you're going to get this thing to fly, you will have to get William Shatner. He knows the ins and outs of conventions, and, without him, you can't have anything. Well, guess what? With all due respect to the great man, Shatner, who's still alive and well, and doing conventions at the age of 90-something, however old he is now, and so forth, we didn't need him. I would have loved to have had him there. And I think if he came, he would have had a much better time than he probably has at these other conventions where he burns himself out signing autographs all day and, and stuff. Because George Takei, his colleague, Mr. Takei, came to our second show in 2004. And he took me aside, George did, the great George, took me aside and he said, Andrew, I'm having a wonderful time this weekend. He said, I've just had a blast. All these other conventions that I go to, it's like they're so packed with people and they're so full, and you can't have a conversation with anybody. But here at yours, it's like it's really moderately well attended, and you can talk with people. So that was just one of many, many compliments I got about the two shows. And when it happened, and once it really got going before it happened, a lot of people were in disbelief. They just could not believe that it was actually happening. Some things are like that, you think about things like that, like something like Bitcoin that traded for as a sub-penny stock, and everybody dissed it and said, oh, this is going nowhere. And how much is one share of it nowadays, or whatever the unit of currency is? 5 figures. Well into the 5 figures. And it's like, you just don't know until it actually happens. And thank God this worked. So I'm going to close this out with really my favorite Twilight. My one, I've got a lot of memories, but I'm going to close it out with this one in tribute to my good friend H.M. Wynant. And before I get into that story, I just want to say that, that it spawned 2 other conventions. Our work here in Los Angeles spawned 2 other conventions, which some of you might have gone to in New Jersey, which were organized by Herman Darvik, who did them twice in New Jersey. So 2 on the West Coast, 2 on the East Coast, and I don't think there will ever be any again. But this story about H.M. Wynant. On the morning of the 2002 convention, I went up to his table, and I'd been communicating with him by email or phone or whatever, and I went up and introduced myself, shook his hand. It was like he didn't even know who I was. And we talked a little bit, and I gave him some money for his autograph picture, and I asked him, do you have any photos with you from The Comedian, the Playhouse 90 episode written by Rod Serling, The Comedian? He said, no, sorry. He said, go talk to Mickey Rooney, who starred in The Comedian. Okay, thank you. And it's like, okay, well, this sure didn't go very well. He didn't even remember me. And then later in the day, right before our dinner started, our VIP dinner where George Clayton Johnson gave the keynote address, right before that, I was out taking people's payments, and they're signing in, the ones who had already paid and everything. And he comes up to me, he said, Andrew, I've been looking for you all day. He said, I'm so sorry I was kind of rude to you earlier. He said, but I didn't know who you were. I'm sorry. He said, I thought you were somebody else. And he said, my apologies. And he said, can I buy you a drink or anything? And I said, no, that's okay. But that started our friendship. We communicated ever since, until the next convention we were in touch. And after I moved here, we saw a lot of each other. We'd get together, and up until the pandemic, we always met semi-regularly. There might be like a year that would go by where maybe we'd miss a year and we wouldn't see each other or something like that. And I haven't seen him since the pandemic started, and now it's over. But I have talked to him on the phone a few times, but he's still going at age 95. I don't know if he's doing any work now, or not, maybe not, but um, he is still with us, and from what I know from the last time I talked to him, which was some months ago, still doing well. So if you attended the convention or you helped us in some way by being there, we did it for you guys. We did it all. It was all for the love of Twilight Zone and everybody else, everybody who attended. Without that, there would have been no point in doing it. We thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and I thank you especially because you helped change my life very much for the better. So the Days of Twilight Zone conventions are over. There are not many actors left from Twilight Zone, and what few there are now very, very, very old. And we really struck while the iron was hot. Still had some heat on it. We did. We really started these things in the nick of time. It was already too late, as I remember one person said to me, you guys started this too late. And it's like, we know, but we couldn't have done it any earlier. There was no way to do it. We didn't know about all these things until really too late. But thankfully, it was not too late. It's just if it had been done earlier, a lot more actors who had been involved with Twilight Zone could have attended. And to totally close this out, they all have said, I've said this before and I'll say it again, I'll echo their words. All of them, virtually all of them, have said Twilight Zone over and above everything else I've ever done in theater, all the plays and TV shows and other things that I've done and been in. Twilight Zone is what everybody knows me for. So you think that the conventions would have been, such a part of would have been done long before we did it for Twilight Zone. But on behalf of both of us, I very much thank you for, giving us this opportunity to serve you. And if you came to the convention or helped us in some way, again, thank you for being there, because without you, there wouldn't have been any. So, thank you very much.